The moment you stop chasing is the moment an avoidant finally feels you. Not because you disappeared, but because you did something that quietly shook their ego. Avoidant personalities don't fear love the way people think they do. What they fear is losing control of themselves inside connection. Their ego is built on being the one who needs less, feels later, and walks away first. So when you over-explain, over-give, or overweight, it doesn't bond them, it reassures their power. But when you calmly remove emotional access without anger, pleading, or drama, something unfamiliar happens inside them. Their nervous system notices the absence. Their ego notices the shift. And for the first time, they are forced to confront a question they avoid at all costs. What if I misjudge this connection? That inner disruption is what awakens attachment, not pursuit. If this is resonating, pause for a moment. Ask yourself whether you've been trying to be chosen instead of choosing yourself. If you want more insights into attachment dynamics and emotional clarity, stay with this message. You're exactly where you need to be. Have you ever wondered why some people seem distant, even when they clearly care? Why they pull away just when intimacy grows closer? That's not because they don't feel love or connection. It's because they fear losing themselves. This is the core of avoidant attachment. Avoidants aren't emotionless. They are deeply feeling people who have learned to guard themselves by controlling the boundaries of closeness. The truth is, avoidants don't fear love. They fear losing their independence inside love. Their ego thrives on self-sufficiency. Being needed can feel threatening because it triggers a deep, almost unconscious anxiety. What if I lose control of myself? What if I become dependent? So they create space, distance, and even silence, not to punish you, but to protect the part of themselves that fears being overwhelmed. Most people misinterpret this behavior. They think distance equals disinterest. They try to chase, explain, or plead. But for an avoidant, chasing doesn't heal the distance. It reinforces it. The more someone pushes for closeness, the more their ego feels pressured, and the more they pull back. What they crave isn't more attention. It's a sense of security that doesn't threaten their autonomy. This is where the dynamic gets tricky. The avoidance withdrawal can feel like rejection, and it can trigger our own attachment anxieties. But here's the secret. You don't need to compete with their fear. You don't need to overcompensate with words, actions, or explanations. What creates curiosity, respect, and eventual attachment is the calm confidence of being whole on your own. When you stop over-explaining or over-giving, when you hold your own emotional space without guilt, the avoidant ego begins to notice something unusual. They are no longer in control of your emotions. And this is exactly what awakens their reflection. Their distance becomes uncomfortable, not because they've lost you, but because their mind starts to realize they've underestimated the connection. They experience a subtle ego disruption that makes them question, have I been pushing away something truly valuable? That is when they start to engage, not out of need, not out of pressure, but because the natural balance of curiosity, respect, and intrigue is restored. So remember this, avoidant attachment is never about a lack of feeling. It's about the fear of losing control. Understanding this transforms how you interact with avoidance. You stop chasing. You stop trying to force emotions. You start holding your own space, your own confidence, and your own calm. And in doing so, you create an environment where attachment grows naturally, subtly, and irresistibly, not through demand, but through quiet strength. Have you noticed how some people can be present one moment and distant the next? That's not randomness. In avoidant attachment, it's a reflection of something much deeper. Their ego is built on independence and emotional self-sufficiency. They value the ability to navigate life on their own, to handle feelings privately, and to appear unshakable. This isn't arrogance, it's a shield. It's a way to feel safe in a world where being vulnerable once led to disappointment or pain. For an avoidant, closeness can feel like a threat. Not because they don't care, but because it challenges the very identity they rely on. Being needed, relying on someone else, or letting someone into their inner world can trigger anxiety. Their sense of self is fragile in this area, not because they are weak, but because it's been conditioned to survive by maintaining autonomy. So they retreat, not to reject, but to preserve the part of themselves that fears losing control. Many people misunderstand this behavior. They interpret it as coldness or disinterest. They push harder, demand more closeness, or try to fix the distance. But these strategies rarely work with avoidance. The more you try to occupy their inner world, the more threatened their ego feels, and the more they pull back. It's a paradox. The harder you chase, the further they run, not because of lack of love, but because their identity demands space. So, what actually draws an avoidant closer? The answer lies in respect for their independence. The more you show that you don't need to control them, that you can maintain your own emotional equilibrium, the more their ego relaxes. When you step back with calm confidence, without drama, guilt, or excessive explanation, you are doing something profound. You are demonstrating that connection doesn't have to be a threat. You are showing that being emotionally self-sufficient does not exclude intimacy. At that moment, their curiosity awakens. They notice the shift in dynamics. Suddenly, they are engaging from a place of interest, not fear. Their ego sees that connection can exist without compromising independence, and this realization draws them in more powerfully than any pleading or chasing ever could. It is subtle, quiet, and lasting. Understanding this is key. Avoidants aren't rejecting love. They are protecting themselves. Their ego is tied to independence and emotional self-sufficiency, and any interaction that respects this framework naturally fosters attachment. By holding your own emotional space, you invite them to step closer, not because they are forced, but because they feel safe choosing to. This balance between closeness and autonomy is the quiet secret to connecting with someone who fears being tied down. It's not about games, it's about understanding the structure of their ego and interacting in a way that honors it while remaining fully, unapologetically yourself. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to pull away the closer you try to get? That's the avoidant dynamic at work. It's subtle, frustrating, and often misunderstood. The truth is, chasing someone who has avoidant tendencies rarely brings them closer. It does the opposite. While anxious personalities find comfort in pursuit, avoidants experience it as pressure. Their ego, built on independence, interprets persistent attention as a threat, not as love. Here's why. Avoidants thrive on maintaining control over their emotional space. When someone chases, their sense of autonomy feels compromised. Every text, call, or plea, even well-intentioned, reminds them that someone else is trying to influence their emotions. Their instinct is to pull back, not out of malice, but out of self-preservation. They aren't rejecting connection. They are protecting their identity. This is why the patterns between anxious and avoidant attachment styles are so recognizable. Anxious types feel safer when pursued, interpreting attention as proof of care. Avoidants, on the other hand, see pursuit as a subtle invasion. The more they are chased, the more their distance grows. The very energy intended to attract them becomes the force that pushes them away. It can feel confusing. You think effort, care, and attention will deepen the bond. But in avoidant dynamics, the opposite is often true. The secret lies in understanding that avoidants need emotional breathing room. They need to feel that connection exists without compromising their self-sufficiency. Chasing undermines that feeling. It signals a lack of confidence in your own stability, which only makes them retreat further. So, what works instead? The key is to focus on your own equilibrium, show care without urgency, demonstrate interest without overinvestment, hold your own emotional space firmly. When you do this, something subtle happens. The avoidant ego notices that you are not dependent on their approval. Your calm confidence, your ability to maintain boundaries, and your refusal to chase disrupt their usual patterns. And in that disruption, they begin to reflect. They start asking themselves questions they usually avoid. Why am I noticing this absence? Why do I feel unsettled even when I want space? That's the moment attachment can naturally grow, not because of chasing, not because of pressure, but because absence, balance, and self-sufficiency spark curiosity and reflection in a way pursuit never can. The takeaway is simple but powerful. Chasing soothes some, but inflates avoidant distance. If you want connection, the answer is not to pursue harder. It's to step back, hold your ground, and let your stability quietly invite them closer. Understanding this dynamic changes everything. You stop exhausting yourself with effort that pushes them away and instead create the conditions where genuine, voluntary closeness can emerge. Have you ever noticed how silence can feel louder than words? For someone with avoidant tendencies, it's not just louder, it's transformative. Avoidants are wired to protect themselves through emotional distance. Their ego thrives on independence, and when someone presses for connection, it often triggers withdrawal. But when you respond differently, through calm self-containment rather than pursuit, the dynamic changes entirely. Avoidants are used to controlling the emotional pace of relationships. They step back when they feel pressure, retreat when they sense neediness, and maintain distance to feel safe. When you mirror this energy by holding your own emotional space, something unexpected happens. Silence becomes not emptiness, but a subtle mirror. It reflects back to them the consequences of their distance without confrontation, guilt, or drama. The power lies in how you manage yourself. Self-containment is not coldness. It's not ignoring or punishing. It's choosing to remain whole, stable, and grounded, regardless of their choices. This sends a quiet signal. I am complete on my own, and connection with you is a choice, not a demand. For an avoidant, that's a profound disruption to the usual dynamic. Suddenly, they can no longer rely on you to accommodate their distance automatically. They are forced, internally, to reflect. Have I been pushing away something meaningful? Reflection is where transformation begins. Avoidants rarely engage with discomfort head-on. They prefer to think they are unaffected, that withdrawal is normal, and that distance is simply the way things are. But when you maintain calm self-containment, their ego is gently shaken. They notice absence without feeling attacked. They confront emotions without pressure. And for the first time, they are invited to examine their own patterns. Not because you forced them, but because your presence is steady and your distance is intentional. This doesn't happen instantly. Avoidants are cautious and deliberate, and their self-reflection is a slow, quiet process. But the consistency of your calm independence slowly rewires the dynamic. They begin to realize that connection doesn't mean losing control. They see that closeness can exist without compromising autonomy. And in that realization, attachment begins to emerge naturally. The key takeaway is simple. Silence and self-containment are not passive strategies. They are active demonstrations of self-respect. They allow the avoidant mind to process, reflect, and eventually re-engage in a way that chasing or pleading never can. By showing that your value and stability don't depend on their responses, you create the rare conditions under which an avoidant can feel both safe and drawn to connection. In essence, quiet strength invites engagement. Calm self-containment forces reflection. And reflection leads to a deeper, more voluntary bond. One built not on pressure, but on respect, curiosity, and the subtle power of your independence. Have you ever noticed how some people only seem to pay attention when you stop paying attention? For someone with avoidant tendencies, this isn't coincidence, it's psychology. Avoidants are deeply attached to their independence and the sense of control it gives them. Their ego is tied to being in charge of emotional access, deciding when and how to engage. But when you calmly remove access without anger, pleading, or drama, something subtle but powerful happens. Their ego experiences a quiet disruption. Avoidants don't respond to confrontation the way others do. They are not easily moved by arguments, explanations, or emotional appeals. In fact, these attempts often push them further away. What their ego responds to is autonomy. When you step back without creating chaos, you demonstrate that your world doesn't revolve around their choices. You show that your presence and attention are not automatic. They are a privilege, not a given. And in that space, their ego begins to notice a gap. This gap is what we call ego injury, but it's not cruel or manipulative. It's simply the recognition that they are no longer the center of your emotional universe. They are confronted with the reality that their usual behaviors, the withdrawal, the avoidance, the subtle testing, no longer guarantee the same responses. And because avoidants are wired to maintain control, this disruption forces them to reflect. Have I misjudged the value of this connection? Here's the subtle brilliance of it. Removing access without drama doesn't shame them. It doesn't punish them. It doesn't demand an apology or explanation. Instead, it creates a quiet, almost imperceptible tension that encourages introspection. Their ego, which thrives on independence and emotional self-sufficiency, is gently challenged. They are made to face the possibility that they might actually care more than they admitted, or that they underestimated your presence and impact. This approach works because it doesn't violate their core need for autonomy. You are not forcing closeness. You are not demanding responses. You are simply holding your own space with calm confidence. That is what awakens curiosity and reflection. In the absence of your automatic availability, the avoidant ego is forced to reassess, recalibrate, and over time, re-engage. The takeaway is profound. Ego injury doesn't come from conflict. It comes from self-respect. When you quietly step back, maintain your boundaries, and remove automatic access, you create a situation where the avoidant mind can't ignore what's happening. They are drawn not by pressure, not by need, but by the natural disruption of their assumptions. And that quiet recalibration is the foundation for deeper, voluntary attachment, one that emerges from reflection, respect, and a subtle shift in the power dynamic. Have you ever wondered why avoidant personalities sometimes seem to pull away and then come back as if nothing happened? It's not random. Avoidants return not because of chasing, pleading, or emotional pressure, but because they perceive safety while maintaining autonomy. Understanding this is key to connecting with someone who values independence as much as connection. Avoidants are wired to protect themselves. Their ego and sense of security are tied to control over emotional space. When that control feels threatened by demands, excessive closeness, or attempts to rush intimacy, they naturally pull back. It's not a reflection of lack of care, it's a reflection of how their mind ensures safety. Ironically, the very behaviors that push them away are often the behaviors that trigger deeper reflection when handled correctly. The moment you combine calm confidence with clear boundaries, you create the environment they crave, a connection that feels safe without compromising their autonomy. This isn't about manipulation or games. It's about showing that your presence is stable, predictable, and not contingent on their every move. You are not trying to control them, nor are you bending yourself to accommodate their every retreat. Instead, you are holding your own emotional ground. For an avoidant, this balance is transformative. Safety alone is not enough. They still need the reassurance that they will not be engulfed or pressured. Autonomy alone is not enough. They need to feel that closeness is possible without fear of losing themselves. But when these two align, when they see that connection exists alongside boundaries and self-sufficiency, their natural curiosity and attachment awaken. They start to engage from interest, not obligation. This is why pressure backfires. Chasing, pleading, or forcing explanations confirms their fears. That closeness comes with surrender, that dependency is demanded, that their autonomy is at risk. Safety without autonomy is perceived as entrapment. Autonomy without safety feels cold and uninviting. But the combination, the gentle, steady presence of someone who is whole, confident, and unattached to outcomes, creates a magnetic pull they cannot ignore. When avoidants sense this balance, they often return quietly, cautiously, and deliberately. They test the boundaries, observe the consistency, and gradually allow themselves to engage more deeply. Their re-engagement isn't dramatic. It's subtle, reflective, and often far more meaningful than forced closeness ever could be. The key takeaway is simple. Avoidants respond to respect for autonomy paired with emotional safety. You don't need to chase, manipulate, or push. You need to hold your space, demonstrate stability, and create a connection that invites them without threatening their independence. This is the quiet power that draws avoidance back, naturally, sustainably, and with real depth. Have you ever felt like being extra or overly emotional should make someone care more, but it doesn't? For avoidant personalities, intensity can actually push them away. What they truly respond to is emotional consistency. Avoidants are wired to protect themselves, and their ego thrives on stability, self-sufficiency, and control. Emotional highs and lows, dramatic expressions, or sudden demands for closeness can trigger retreat rather than connection. Avoidants are not incapable of feeling deeply, they are, but their attachment style teaches them to regulate, distance, and self-protect. They measure safety in predictability, not excitement. So while emotional intensity may feel like passion or proof of care, to an avoidant, it often signals unpredictability and potential loss of control. Their ego interprets chaos as a threat, and the natural response is withdrawal. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. When you respond with steady attention, calm presence, and reliable emotional grounding, you create an environment that feels safe for avoidance. It's not about being indifferent or unemotional. It's about showing that your feelings, your boundaries, and your presence are stable. They can depend on you without feeling overwhelmed. They can engage without fear of losing themselves. Emotional consistency is subtle, but it is magnetic. Avoidants notice patterns more than moments. They notice when you remain composed instead of reacting to every push or pull. They notice when your emotional availability is predictable, measured, and secure. Over time, this quiet reliability draws them closer because it reassures them that intimacy doesn't require surrender. Connection doesn't have to threaten autonomy. Contrast this with emotional intensity. The highs may feel exciting, the passion may feel meaningful, but avoidants often perceive it as volatility. If every interaction is charged with drama or extreme emotion, they associate closeness with stress. They pull away, not because they don't care, but because their ego cannot reconcile love with loss of control. Stability, not fireworks, creates curiosity, attachment, and trust. The lesson is clear. Consistency builds bonds, intensity risks breaking them. To engage an avoidant effectively, focus on reliability, calm presence, and emotional steadiness. Let your actions match your words, your attention match your energy, and your boundaries remain intact. In doing so, you create a space where avoidants can lower their guard, reflect on the connection, and gradually engage with genuine interest. Ultimately, emotional consistency is quiet power. It reassures without pleading, invites without pressure, and fosters connection without compromise. While intensity may flare briefly, it is consistency that sustains, attracts, and ultimately draws an avoidant heart closer over time.